This might be the last video about Incredibox Sprunki on this channel, and I'd like to wrap up with a final summary of those amazing 2 months that Incredibox Sprunki gave us. While everyone is busy speculating and coming up with theories about who the real killer is, Nyanko has cleverly hidden the answer right in the storyline of Incredibox Sprunki. And the truth is, the killer is... Why did Gray kill almost all the Sprunki and why he is the main killer? In this video, I will prove this theory. We already know a lot about Incredibox Sprunki. Many were killed, and while there were several killers, only Wenda has been officially confirmed so far. Of course, we're familiar with the story of the phase transition and its consequences, how the characters interacted, who survived, and who turned into monsters. We know for sure who died, but every time new information comes from the developer, our understanding of the Sprunki world gets turned upside down. We were confident that Lime was alive because, compared to others, his injuries seemed relatively minor. But now it's been revealed that he's dead, making the theory of Lime being the second killer obsolete. We don't even know the true number of victims claimed by these killers. Officially, only one has been confirmed: Tunner, who was killed by Wenda using his own weapon. Few have paid much attention to one seemingly insignificant character, Mr. Fun. Let's listen to what he says in the second phase because his words will set the tone for the first part of this wild video. All these phases, the deaths, the monsters, the deranged Wenda, what if they are all part of something entirely unreal? I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not blind. I see it all. What I'm suggesting is that these events might not have taken place in the real world of Incredibox Sprunki, but somewhere else. Sorry if that sounds confusing, but it'll make sense in a moment. Mr. Fun is the only character capable of understanding and speaking human language. He constantly repeats phrases like, "You can't hide here," "Everyone is dead." But the most intriguing part is when he talks about these characters and events being unreal. And his endlessly repeated warning, "Run, run, run," makes it seem like he's addressing us directly, urging us to escape before we're dragged into this nightmare ourselves. But there's a small inconsistency in his words. Mr. Fun claims that everyone is dead, yet we know for a fact that not all Sprunki have died. Simon and Veneria, for example, transformed into monsters, meaning they survived. Gray and Jevin also made it out alive, as did the other killer or killers. And I won't even mention the creatures who don't resemble Sprunki. That's too obvious. Among them, of course, is Mr. Fun himself, and this detail will be crucial a bit later. Even within this inconsistency, there are clues that suggest this might all be someone's twisted dream. We've been officially told that Gray is the central figure of the second phase. Meanwhile, in the first phase, the main character isn't Wenda, Black, Jevin, or even Gray. It's the seemingly insignificant yet highly important Simon. Right now, this information might not mean much, but I'm convinced that in the future, the developer will reveal much more about this connection. The second phase, being a dream, is a plausible theory, supported by several strange details. First, let's consider the background behind the dead Sprunki. It feels incredibly unnatural. There are eerie eyes in the sky, and the time of day is ambiguous. The sun seems to either be rising or setting. This bizarre atmosphere surrounding the second phase might even hint that this is one of the variations of hell in the Incredibox Sprunki universe. The disturbing faces, particularly those of Black and the characters who turned into monsters, are also worth noting. Many of us have experienced dreams with grotesque creatures, so this could be another subtle indication that we're dealing with a dream. But the most compelling evidence lies in the sheer illogicality of events and the Sprunki's actions. For instance, we're told that 90% of the Sprunki have died, yet they appear completely alive. Even if we dismiss the idea of them being dead, characters like Tunner and Lime are officially confirmed to have been killed, yet they look and act just like the living. How else can this be explained if not as a deranged dream or something similar? And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Fun literally states that none of this is real. Considering Gray is officially the central figure of the second phase, it's highly plausible that this is simply his horrific and vile nightmare. This interpretation starts to make more sense when we examine the relationships between the characters. We know there's conflict between Wenda and Tunner, as well as between Lime and Ratty, but most of the other Sprunki get along relatively well. It's odd that they'd suddenly decide to kill each other, especially while entirely changing the setting of the events. This dream theory ties everything together more logically, highlighting the surreal and chaotic nature of the second phase. There's also a theory that this isn't a dream at all, but actually hallucinations caused by Gray himself. Think about Mr. Fun's words, and now take a good look at Gray. Can we really deny that a Sprunki this unstable could be having hallucinations? Gray might have created this terrifying world in his head. A world where everything is just wrong. Some turned into monsters, some lost their minds, and others straight up died. What's really weird is how Gray is right at the center of all this. We see him alive, but he's scared out of his mind. That strange look in his eyes, it's like he's been through this nightmare before. And every time, he's praying it'll finally stop. But that last time just never comes. And you can practically feel the panic eating him alive. That's exactly what we're seeing in the second phase. Now let's talk about Black, who low-key adds fuel to this theory. What if he's not even real? He doesn't show up in the first phase. There's just his icon. And when you pick him, boom, you're thrown into the second phase, where Black looks all kinds of creepy and messed up. Here's where it gets interesting. What if Black is some kind of metaphor? Maybe for medication. Hang with me for a second. It makes sense. In the first phase, Gray already looks a little shaky, like something's seriously off with him. That could hint at a mental health struggle, maybe depression or something similar. And here's the kicker. Gray's condition might have gotten worse over time because of his tendency to hallucinate. He probably managed to keep those hallucinations in check with meds for a while. But now, it looks like the meds backfired. During one of his panic attacks, Gray took his pills, and instead of helping, they dragged him into an even darker and more horrifying place. But this is just the beginning of this twisted story. Remember how I mentioned that it's been officially confirmed Gray is the main character of the second phase? Yet, popular opinion insists Wenda is the real killer, and leaks from the developers seem to back that up. Now, take a closer look at these two characters, and oh my god, they're actually super similar. Once again, let's recall Mr. Fun's cryptic words. He claims that everything happening isn't real, but most of the Sprunki are dead. And this is where things get really interesting. What if the second phase, as we see it, is just a product of Gray's sick imagination? Or better yet, his hallucinations? Gray could have created all of this as a way to avoid facing the truth that he is the real killer in the world of Incredibox Sprunki. To shield himself from that horrifying realization, he invented Wenda as the villain, a twisted version of events where she's the one who killed everyone. But then comes the moment of clarity. The realization that this Wenda he's concocted is nothing but an illusion. When Gray finally confronts the truth, that in the real world he is the one who killed the Sprunki, we get that haunting, terrified look on his face. Black is one of the most mysterious and controversial Sprunki out there. When it comes to the others, we at least have some clarity, like Wenda being a confirmed killer, Jevin and Gray making it out alive, and some Sprunki not surviving at all. But Black, he's an enigma. The only thing the creator ever mentioned about him is that his voice in the first phase was supposed to sound like something out of Monochrome, just pitched lower. That's literally all we know. He doesn't show up in the first phase, and if you try dragging his icon onto a model in the game, you're immediately thrown into the second phase, where Black looks downright creepy and menacing. But who is he really? What's his deal? Why is he even in the Incredibox Sprunki universe? Is he a good guy or a villain? And how exactly is he tied to Jevin, Wenda, and some of the other Sprunki involved in the horrifying chaos we see unfold in Phase 2? We've got a couple of theories about who or what Black might actually be. The first one seems to be the most popular. Black could be the ultimate villain, someone who possibly hypnotized or manipulated certain Sprunki into becoming killers. From what little we know, Black wasn't even supposed to exist in the Incredibox Sprunki world at first, but after making some changes, the developer decided to make him canon. Initially, the Sprunki world was meant to stay as cheerful and carefree as it was in the first phase, but it seems like Nyanko wanted to add a darker twist to the story, and that's how Black came to be. According to this theory, Black is an anti-hero of sorts, a character meant to expose the darker side of the Sprunki universe. We know that some Sprunki are friends, others are romantically involved, and then there are those who outright hate each other, like Ratty and Lime. If you didn't know, canonically in Phase 1, Ratty hit Lime over the head with a hammer. Even though the Sprunki world seems all magical and happy on the surface, most of them either distrust each other at best or secretly despise one another at worst. But they can't openly show it. That's where Black comes in. He's like a prophet, or maybe even a savior, who exposes the hidden truths of the Sprunki universe and forces everyone to see it for what it really is. Now, let's touch on an intriguing theory that claims Phase 2 is the true reality of the Sprunki world, while Phase 1 is just a fabricated illusion meant to hide what's really happening. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting this theory is Ratty. Canonically, we know that besides Wenda, there are other killers. If you look at all the Sprunki victims, sure, they were all killed in horrifying ways, but Ratty, he went through something far worse than the others. The brutality of his fate suggests the work of a complete madman, and Lime fits that description perfectly. Lime escaped from a psychiatric hospital, and nothing in his behavior, whether in Phase 1 or Phase 2, suggests that he's recovered from his mental health issues. After being struck by Ratty, Lime could have decided to take revenge in the most twisted way imaginable. If this theory is true, then Black isn't really a villain, or even a hero. He's more of a metaphorical entity, one that doesn't actually exist but represents the brutal, unfiltered truth of the Incredibox Sprunki universe. The third theory claims that Black isn't just an ordinary Sprunki. In fact, he's not a Sprunki at all. He's a terrifying demon who came to the Sprunki world straight from hell and dragged everyone into his domain. But how did he even end up with the other Sprunki? The developer officially confirmed two key details. Jevin is a cultist, and Black didn't kill certain characters, including Jevin, simply because he forgot about them. Additionally, Nyanko clarified that Jevin is not a killer and is actually on the good side. So what if Jevin, in his fascination with cult practices, accidentally summoned Black? Maybe he got something wrong during a ritual, and this mistake unleashed the demon into their world. Once there, Black hypnotized Wenda and a few others, sending them all to his hellish realm, where the events we know unfolded. Interestingly, Black didn't kill anyone directly. Instead, his influence drove all the Sprunki to madness, causing them to destroy one another. Some fell under his hypnosis, others lost their minds entirely and started killing without any real purpose, and some were physically transformed into monsters. For example, Simon's transformation ultimately turned out fine, but the plant canonically growing within Veneria's body was corrupted by Black. As a result, the very thing inside Veneria ended up killing her. As for Jevin, Black might have spared him not just because he forgot, but because Jevin is, in a way, his master. It wouldn't make much sense, or be very polite, for Black to kill the Sprunki, who, albeit accidentally, gave him the opportunity to execute his sinister plan. But what if Black is actually a good character who fell under the negative influence of another Sprunki? The most obvious and straightforward culprit here is Wenda, who's officially a killer. She brutally murdered Tunner, and we know that Tunner was not only the sheriff of the Incredibox Sprunki universe, but also someone who was always ready to protect others. Oddly enough, Tunner became Wenda's first victim. While Wenda's confirmed body count currently includes only Tunner, many fans believe this is just the beginning of a much larger story we haven't been told yet. For a long time, Wenda may have been trying to manipulate other Sprunki to assist her in carrying out her gruesome plans. Black, as it turns out, may have succumbed to her influence, ultimately ending up on the bad side. Considering that the developer confirmed Black didn't kill certain characters simply because he forgot about them, it's safe to assume that some Sprunki, who couldn't hide or escape, fell victim to both Wenda and Black. This means Black isn't necessarily the ultimate villain, or even a killer in the Sprunki universe. So much as a pawn. He may be one of the few, or even the only Sprunki, who fell prey to Wenda's manipulation and began killing not because of insanity, like another character we discussed earlier, but because of Wenda's devious schemes. In previous theories, Black has been seen as everything from a god to a demon, a good Sprunki, and even a cold-blooded killer. But this final theory dismisses Black's existence as a physical being entirely. Instead, it suggests he's merely a symbol of transition and chaos. Let's take a closer look. One of the most underrated characters in the Incredibox Sprunki universe is Mr. Fun. In the second phase, he says some intriguing lines. Nothing here is real, yet everyone is dead. This cryptic statement hints that the events of the second phase might be distorted, perhaps even imagined. And in this context, Black is simply a metaphor for what's happening rather than a tangible being. The central figure of this theory is Gray, who was already peculiar in the first phase, let alone his unsettling behavior in the second phase. According to this theory, the so-called hell isn't real, but a vivid hallucination experienced by Gray. Gray is portrayed as a deeply anxious and fragile character, and it's plausible that some event pushed him to his breaking point. This mental collapse could have led to a catastrophic chain of events, the mass destruction of the Sprunki. The horrors we see in the second phase might be Gray's way of processing the guilt and pain he felt after realizing what he'd done. In short, Black isn't a physical character at all, but represents the turning point in Gray's life. The moment everything went wrong. Black is a manifestation of the trauma that led to the tragic downfall of the Sprunki. If this piques your interest, I explored this theory in greater detail in one of my videos, where I dive into the psychological depths of Gray and his descent into madness. The creator of the Incredibox Sprunki mod, Nyanko, recently found himself at the center of a drama that's now fully out in the open. We've learned a lot of interesting details that need to be discussed. But before diving in, let's take a look at the message Nyanko directed at all of us. How it started. There was me, Nyanko BF LOL. I'm a big fan of this game called Incredibox. One day I wanted to make an Incredibox mod, but I wanted to do something new, something no one has ever done. I made a mod called Sprunki and published it, but I did not know how much of an impact this mod could have done to me and the community. Let's get this topic out of the way first. The hacking incident. My Discord account got hacked and my Discord server got deleted. The hacker has done several things, such as saying the N-word and sending weird texts to my friends and leaking my face, name, and family pictures. He also hacked my Scratch account, which has a lot of works and games there. Now they're all gone. The hacking incident is one of the reasons I canceled Sprunki. But let me tell you that it was not the main reason. It was already canceled before the incident. That's because of overpopularity. Right here, right now, look up Incredibox on YouTube or Google. What do you see? Yep, it's all Sprunki. Sprunki was intended to be an Incredibox mod, but now Sprunki is more popular than Incredibox. This is a big problem because it overshadowed other good mods and contents, and Incredibox would be known just for Sprunki. Even some people hated Incredibox even if Sprunki is Incredibox. This led to some people calling Incredibox Sprunki ripoff, which is a huge disrespect to the Incredibox community. At least Sprunki introduced some people to Incredibox, which is good. Content farms and hates. Thank God I don't use Twitter X, but I heard people are hating on me because of the Sprunki content farms, which is ridiculous. It's not like I can control the content farms, it's not like everyone is gonna see my post and such, and I don't think some fans even know that I made Sprunki. You can hate the content farms, but you don't need to hate the mod itself. You can hate Sprunki, but you don't need to hate me too. This is kind of a small thing, but I would like to mention them. Sprunki Reskins. Ever heard of green screen kids on YouTube? It's kind of like that. People are stealing other Incredibox mods and replaces everyone with Sprunki. And because it's Sprunki, they get more views than the original. This need to be stopped. So, what I need you to do is respect Incredibox, play other Incredibox mods, and don't let them die. And do not mention about the hacking situation to me. I know you feel sorry and stuff, but knowing about it makes me feel upset, and I want to forget about it. And stop making Sprunki reskins. Remember that I could come back and change this description anytime. Either I made a mistake or I want to add more things. The main takeaway from this message is that Sprunki has officially been canceled due to several specific reasons. The turning point was the hacking of Nyanko's Discord account and the problems that followed. However, this is just a small part of the challenges Nyanko faced as Sprunki skyrocketed in popularity. To some extent, I can understand Nyanko's position. At only 15 years old, he likely didn't anticipate creating a trend that would completely take over YouTube in mere days and remain a hot topic among content creators for months. Nyanko simply wanted to make a mod for his favorite game, Incredibox, but things turned out very differently. He wasn't prepared for such a massive surge of attention, and that was the first thing that began to wear him down. Nyanko isn't one of those creators who aim to squeeze every last drop out of their creation, and that's something that earns him immense respect. Content farm channels are a whole separate issue in the YouTube community. As soon as something becomes popular, countless channels suddenly shift their focus toward the new trend. This was predictable from the start, but the main problem in Nyanko's drama isn't the existence of such channels. It's the fact that many people started posting angry comments directed at Nyanko because content farm channels latched onto his creation. That's just absurd. I honestly can't understand the mindset of people who genuinely blame Nyanko for his work becoming a target for content farm channels. Throughout his entire post, Nyanko kept trying to convey one crucial idea. You can hate content farm channels, you can hate Incredibox Sprunki, but don't hate me! And I fully agree with him. However, it's not just the community that's the issue. Despite many animations being well crafted, nearly all of them revolve around the same repetitive themes. As for Sprunki Reskins, there's really not much to add. This type of content doesn't contribute in any way to the development of the Sprunki universe. It simply squeezes out the very last drops from this so-called project. At the moment, this is all the information we have, but even based on this, we can confidently state that Nyanko has become a victim of modern realities. He never expected such insane success for his harmless mod and certainly didn't want it. It seems to me that all he wanted was to create a mod for a popular game that would be appreciated by Incredibox enthusiasts. Instead, Sprunki became globally famous. His lack of preparedness, coupled with his young age, didn't equip him to handle this overwhelming attention, and ultimately, he just burned out because of his own project. To the creator himself, I'd like to wish strength, pride, and the resilience to overcome this nightmare with newfound experience and knowledge, so he can create another mod that might even surpass the success of Sprunki. Among the countless characters in Incredibox Sprunki, one stands out above the rest: Wenda, the white cat. According to official sources, Wenda is one of the killers, though not the only one, responsible for making many Sprunki experience the most terrifying moments of their lives. However, we still don't know why she did it. What was the breaking point that caused Wenda to snap and start taking down Sprunki one by one? And why did she spare Gray? Does he have a deeper connection to this story? Let's finally unravel the mystery of Wenda. We'll start by exploring Wenda's relationships with the other characters, which will be the key to understanding her true nature. Truthfully, we know very little about how Wenda interacted with the other Sprunki, so we can only speculate about their relationships. Given the fact that in the second phase, Wenda decided to eliminate nearly all the Sprunki, I'd venture to say that her connection with them was, at best, strained. But why does Gray raise the most questions? I think the mod creator deliberately highlighted that Wenda and Gray aren't related, but if we look at their designs, it's clear just how similar they are. For some reason, I get the feeling that Wenda harbors deeper feelings for Gray than most people realize. This could have been one of the factors that allowed Gray to survive that chaotic transition between phases. One of the most popular theories about Gray's survival is that he managed to hide somewhere and just hope no one would find him. However, during his hiding, he witnessed everything that happened, leaving him with what's often called the 1,000-yard stare. But let's take a moment to think about this. Wenda managed to track down and eliminate many Sprunki who, for one, seemed tougher than Gray, and second, probably also tried to hide. Yet, Gray is the one who survived. Let that sink in. Even if Wenda doesn't have any particular feelings toward Gray, it's likely they were friends. We've seen a similar dynamic in Incredibox Sprunki between Simon and Oren, who are also very similar in appearance but aren't related. Perhaps the mod creator intended this as a nod to the relationship between Wenda and Gray. It might just be a coincidence, but otherwise, it's tough to explain why Gray specifically was spared. Wenda simply chose to let Gray live, while another Sprunki wasn't so lucky. Of course, I'm talking about Tunner, who, by all accounts, seemed to be Wenda's primary enemy, or something close to it. We know from official sources that Wenda has a knife, likely her weapon of choice for most of her crimes. However, Tunner met a different fate. According to the lore, Tunner carried a gun, possibly for self-defense, but it seems Wenda outsmarted him and turned his own weapon against him, a chilling detail we clearly see in the second phase. This detail is pretty significant. If Wenda didn't use her knife, it means she knew that trying to take down Tunner with it would only get her neutralized quickly. So, she had to be smarter about it. Most likely, she tricked him into giving up his weapon. And, well, you know how the rest played out. But why did Wenda target Tunner first? According to the canon, Tunner is the sheriff and sees it as his duty to protect the other Sprunki. So, from Wenda's perspective, eliminating the sheriff was a logical move. She had to get rid of the one person who could stop her and save the others. As I mentioned before, we don't know much about Wenda's relationships with most of the Sprunki, but I'm almost 100% sure she maintained good ties with either the ones who turned into monsters in the second phase, or those who, like her, became killers. After all, she would have needed a partner to pull this off. Now let's revisit the connection between Wenda and Gray, because it's one of the most critical aspects of this whole mystery. In the second phase, Wenda bears a striking resemblance to Gray, something fans of Incredibox Sprunki picked up on immediately. They bombarded the creator with questions about their relationship, to which we got an official and very clear answer. Wenda and Gray are not related, but the creator left their true connection a mystery, almost as if it was deliberately planned to intrigue us. And then there's the fact that Gray didn't get a single scratch, while someone like Ratty endured one of the most horrifying deaths. That raises even more questions, ones we can't help but keep asking. Maybe they're just friends, or maybe there's something romantic between them. Or perhaps Wenda is hopelessly in love with Gray, but doesn't get any reciprocation. Based on that, you could craft a theory, like Wenda's insane jealousy driving her to eliminate everyone while sparing Gray. But there's absolutely no evidence, not even indirect hints to support this. So we'll dismiss such theories right away. Let's focus on more plausible ideas. One of them suggests that Wenda didn't act of her own free will. Although judging by her smile, it's hard to say that's the case. Let's revisit the theory that someone made Wenda kill so many Sprunki. The main suspect here is Black. While we don't have any official confirmation, one detail makes this theory increasingly believable. When you select Black in the first phase, you're sent straight to the hellish realm where almost all the Sprunki meet their end. This detail sparked the theory that Black might actually be the second killer, but then why is Wenda so cheerful about it? There's another theory suggesting that Black hypnotized Wenda into doing his dirty work. Of course, we can't rule out the possibility that Black isn't involved at all, and that Wenda just lost her mind. However, this version has a flaw. Wenda isn't the only one who's gone mad, and every unhinged character in this story has their own distinct motives. Maybe there. For example, let's take a closer look at Lime, who definitely managed to survive, albeit at the cost of losing his lower jaw. In the first phase, there was a minor conflict between Ratty and Lime, during which Ratty hit Lime with a hammer. Then, in the second phase, Ratty suffered one of the most excruciating deaths. It's entirely possible that Wenda had nothing to do with his demise. Even when the Sprunki world seems cheerful and wholesome, that's far from the truth. The Sprunki aren't exactly the most harmonious bunch, and conflicts arise among them. So, pinning all the blame on Wenda isn't entirely fair. Returning to Lime, canonically, he was undergoing treatment in a psychiatric facility before escaping. Honestly, I find it more believable that he escaped rather than being discharged. This mix of unresolved mental health issues and lingering resentment could very well explain the brutal revenge he sought. I believe the main culprit is Black. While the developers haven't confirmed this, the fact that Black is the one who takes us to the Hell phase makes him a prime suspect. Wenda and Lime, on the other hand, might just be pawns in this twisted game. Black could have manipulated them, planting the idea that everyone around them was an enemy and that they needed to eliminate these threats before they got hurt themselves. While we can't say for sure whether Wenda struggles with mental health issues, it's clear that the world of Incredibox Sprunki isn't as bright and cheerful as it seems. It's safe to assume that Wenda harbored grudges or ill feelings toward someone. After committing the first murder, it's possible Wenda became consumed by her actions, unable to stop, and continued seeking revenge against everyone she encountered. If we follow this theory, Tunner may have been the one who wronged Wenda in the past. Coincidentally, he was also the only one capable of protecting the other Sprunki. Once Wenda realized no one could stop her anymore, she descended into chaos, hunting down every Sprunki she could reach and unleashing her bottled-up rage. Who managed to save all the Sprunki after Phase 2? Did they really survive that transition between phases? Incredibox Sprunki is yet another mod for the once wildly popular game Incredibox. Probably the most mysterious one is Black, since, canonically, it's after his part that we enter the next phase where many characters meet their end. And not just any end. They're killed off in various brutal ways, especially Ratty and Kluker, though that's just my subjective take. However, some managed to survive, like Durple, Gray, Wenda, and a few others. This immediately raises a pressing question. Is there a way to save all the characters? And if so, how? Canonically, we know some survive. So we're left with two possible scenarios. The first theory is that there's actually no death at all. According to the second theory, after the horrific events in their world, all the Sprunki somehow survive or regenerate. There's also an alternate path after selecting Black. One that lands us in a place that looks like the game's beginning, but a bit dimmer. Canonically, entering Hell turns Black into a creepy character, but in this version, he's far from scary. If anything, he looks quite sad about what seems like a failure. When players first encountered this setting, it raised a ton of questions. What's going on here? Where's Hell? Where are all the dead Sprunki? Even stranger, the haunting music still plays. Now we arrive at the climax and reveal the hero of this video, Xavier Pros. He created a mod that lets us experience an alternate reality of the second phase. Let's compare a few characters from the original to their versions in this lighter mod. Starting with Orin, we remember that canonically, his body is torn apart and some organs were likely removed. However, in this alternative version, he's bandaged up and able to enjoy life again. Although that doesn't seem to be happening here. Ratty sparked the most curiosity for me. In the original, his entire muscle structure and skin are stripped from one side of his face, his body is torn, and most uniquely, he's the only one who's both dismembered and hung. But in this mod, we only see his bandaged head, raising the question, why are there no strangulation marks? This detail might lend support to the theory that death, as we understand it, doesn't exist in Incredibox Sprunki. The only harm that can come to Sprunki is through physical damage, like Brud's bites, Kluker's strikes, or blows to characters like Sky and Lime. But in this context, such attacks damage the body rather than taking life. After everything Ratty endured, survival chances should be slim since his destruction took place in stages. Drawing a real-world comparison, surviving a lost limb is possible. But without oxygen, survival chances drop to 0. This hints that in Sprunki's world, no matter how severe the physical damage, true death may not be in the cards. Let's return to the survival of the Sprunki. We see they're all alive and bandaged up again, meaning they're technically safe now. But if we compare their state before and after the first phase, there's an obvious shift in their attitudes. The Sprunki are no longer joyful and carefree. Genuine fear is etched onto their faces. Even Gray, who didn't change much in the second phase, now shows less anxiety on his face than before. And as many fans know, the main villain of all this horror is the now iconic Wenda, who looked the happiest of everyone in the second phase. In the alternate mod, she might still seem content, but in the first few seconds of her appearance, you can clearly see anger and frustration on her face. It's obvious this came from her failure to complete her cruel, twisted plan, with all the Sprunki surviving in the end. If we look at each character, it's clear everyone made it out alive. Even Pinky and Brood, who somehow survived their injuries. So, if you're a fan of happy endings, this alternate version of Incredibox Sprunki would definitely appeal to you. But as with all happy endings, A perfect ending isn't possible because, canonically, the characters have already been traumatized. Even if they're physically unharmed, their mental health is forever scarred. Some, like Derpel, witnessed the horrors firsthand, and seeing what happened to Ratty or Sky, their psyches will never fully recover from the experience. But the fact that they were all saved is there, and there's no changing that. So let's dive into a few theories about how they might have been rescued and who could have helped them. One popular theory suggests that Black was actually the one who saved everyone. You might be wondering how he managed that if, in the original mod, he was the one who sent everyone to hell in the first place. There's a theory that Wenda, despite how ruthless she appears, may have been hypnotized by Black into committing the terrible acts we see in the second phase. In the original mod, it could be that Black, in a twist, became their savior. After we put on his hat, we see all the Sprunki alive. So maybe at some point, Wenda herself wanted to kill everyone, and Black stepped in, resisting and fighting her to stop the massacre. In that case, he might not appear upset, but rather exhausted. It's possible he wasn't working alone. Jevin is a likely ally, since he's always shown as calm. Maybe Derpel and Gray contributed to the rescue, or perhaps even some Sprunki were secretly aiding Wenda. Interestingly, Simon stands out in the second phase when he transforms into a monster and, according to one theory, is the one who injured Brood. This suggests that Black and the others had to save the Sprunki not only from Wenda and other killers, but also from characters who turned monsters. Looking at Brood's bandaged body parts, it seems he didn't fully escape harm, receiving the same injuries from Simon as he did in the original storyline. There's also a theory that puts Wenda herself at the center. What if she genuinely wanted to kill all the Sprunki? In this version, unlike the original, maybe Wenda didn't have any allies or help in her mission, attempting the destruction all on her own. Could that be why her plan ultimately failed? We also know that Tunner possesses a weapon that led to his own injury in the second phase, with Wenda shooting him with it according to the canon. In the rescue mod, we see only a small patch on his hat, which raised eyebrows for some fans since we don't see what's under his hat. It sounds a bit humorous, but it's logical that his head would be bandaged like many others. More interesting to explore is Lime's case. Canonically, in the second phase, he loses his entire lower jaw. However, in this alternate version, there's no trace of this injury. And then there's Veneria, one of the creepiest characters in the second phase. In the rescue mod, there are no bandages or other signs of abuse on her, except for one striking detail: she has no eyes. In the original, something appears to grow from her eye sockets, causing her to lose her eyes. This brings us back to Simon, who turned into a monster and, as a result, survived. What if Veneria attempted something similar but wasn't as successful, effectively destroying herself in the process? In conclusion, I'd say this version of events feels pretty plausible, and we might actually have hope that our favorite Sprunki characters managed to survive and save themselves.